In 1880, a man walked through an Irish village and discovered something power had not prepared him for. No one would look at him. Storekeepers pretended not to hear him. Workers vanished when he approached. Even the blacksmith refused his business. He had soldiers, he had the law, he had the backing of the British government, and still, he could not persuade another human being to speak his name out loud. 19th century Ireland lived under tension that had been building for generations. Most ordinary farmers did not own the land they worked. Estates were controlled by wealthy landlords, many of whom lived comfortably in England, while Irish tenant families struggled through debt, failed harvests, and uncertainty. The arrangement survived because the law enforced it. Rent was due whether crops succeeded or failed, and if rent could not be paid, eviction followed. Now, governments often imagine power in obvious forms: courts, police, armies, prisons. But systems of authority rely on something quieter too: daily cooperation. The willingness of ordinary people to participate, and in 1880, Irish farmers began experimenting with what would happen if that cooperation disappeared. The conflict centered around a land agent working for an English landlord in County Mayo. After a poor harvest, struggling tenant farmers asked for reduced rents. The request was denied, and evictions began. That was when local resistance changed shape. First, there were no mobs, no army uprising. Instead, people simply stopped cooperating. Laborers refused to harvest crops. Shops refused service. Neighbors ended conversations when the man approached. Workers disappeared from fields, and even the local mail carrier became reluctant to interact with him. Think about the strangeness of that. An entire community deciding peacefully but collectively that one man would no longer participate in ordinary society. And the deeper irony was impossible to miss. The British Empire controlled Ireland with courts, police, soldiers, and law, yet suddenly the empire found itself unable to solve a simpler problem. How do you force free human beings to voluntarily associate with someone they reject? The authorities escalated quickly. Workers had to be imported from outside the region under armed military protection. Soldiers guarded fields, police escorted laborers. The government spent enormous sums simply trying to harvest crops from contested land. And even then, the operation became humiliating. The security cost exceeded the value of the harvest itself. That image stayed with people. An entire empire deploying armed protection, not against violent revolution, but against social refusal. Because underneath every government sits an uncomfortable truth. Force can compel obedience in certain moments, but it cannot manufacture legitimacy, it cannot create trust, and it cannot easily replace the invisible web of voluntary relationships that follow societies to function normally in the first place. That is what made this episode historic. Not merely protest, but ordinary people discovering the power of peaceful non-cooperation against centralized authority. Eventually, the isolated land agent left Ireland entirely, but something else remained behind. A new word entered the English language, a word created from the name of the man no one would acknowledge. His name was Captain Charles Boycott. And ever since then, when ordinary people peacefully withdraw cooperation from institutions or individuals they believe have abused power, the world has called it a boycott. And that's another story in freedom's long history.